All right. We did it. For being something so simple, it's not simple. Welcome, everybody, to our live stream. Thanks for being moving stuff around.
Even though I walked in the valley of the shadow,
making it happen. And I got guy Brandon and letting people know we're live now. So it's good to see everybody. My name's Karl, and this is Jamey, Jamey's my mentor, a close friend. He was my youth pastor growing up. I've known him for going on, 25 years.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Almost. How crazy is that? That makes me feel really old. Yeah, so we're here to talk about leadership challenges and what that, how to overcome them, how to work through them, how to navigate them, especially in this ever-changing, more technical world. I'm going to be bouncing around between the chat and straight up just looking at Jamey. So I look a little distracted. This is all new. I've never, the last time, this is only the second time, so I'm figuring it out. Anyway, so that's, Jamey, introduce a little bit about yourself.
I mean, what do you want to know? That's a wide open question.
That is a wide open question. So what do you do? How do you, what do you do? What's your leadership like in your life?
Yeah, Karl and I have known each other for 25 years, and I've been a pastor the entire time. So when I speak of leadership, I talk about it from that perspective, from being inside of the church and leading the church. I'm a lead pastor at Genesis Church in Muskegon, Michigan. And my wife and I planted the church about 16 years ago. And prior to that, I was a youth pastor. So my leadership is inside of a church setting, working with people that are volunteering their time, people that are volunteering their giving, that are volunteering, they're serving. And it's a whole different dynamic of leadership that is entailed with that. In addition, kind of as a side note, I also coach high school sports. And I've done that for the last 25, 30 years at the varsity level with football or baseball currently. And that also has a different level of leadership and different angle that has its issues and challenges and rewards that go along with that. So my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have 3 adult children. We have 1 3-year-old granddaughter. So that's kind of our little short summary of who I am.
Super short. And I liked how you talked about, it's been interesting. So I worked in the church for 10 years, and now I work at a car dealership. I've learned a lot about leadership. And you talked about that idea of I work a lot with volunteer leaders and with paid staff leaders. Obviously, there's a difference with pay and compensation and everything. Do you feel that in the leadership spectrum, there is this massive difference between volunteer leadership and paid leadership?
Yeah, without question. I read a long time ago, a leader said that the church is the most leadership intensive organization in the world.
Oh,
and
that's the truth.
And the deeper I get into this, the more I realize that is true, because in a church setting, I'm working with people where I have no leverage over them.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm your boss. I can't say, I write your paycheck. None of that is true, because everybody's volunteering to serve. They're volunteering their time. They're volunteering to show up on Sunday. And so that really elevates the level of leadership that's required to be able to influence people and to motivate people and to lead people in a way that you don't have the leverage that the rest of the world has, especially in a workplace setting where you just do what you're told to do because it's your job. And leadership at its purest form, I think, takes place inside of something like a church setting, and also something like a coaching kind of a setting, where you're just trying to lead these people and move them from point A to point B with with very, very minimal leverage at best. It's pure influence at that point.
See, it's interesting because you're 100% correct. I think as we're again talking about a little bit, and we'll hit a little bit more at the end of the conversation about the future of leadership, because this really makes me think when you talk about quiet quitting, when you talk about revenge quitting is kind of becoming a thing now, and how people leverage their jobs, that this whole authority structure that we've built for generations, and just because I say so, it obviously still has authority in people's lives, but it's less. I feel like it's becoming less meaningful and requiring leadership to grow in all arenas. Again, not as intense as I would say in volunteer, because again, you got to be on top of your game every single time. Somebody's boss doesn't, just because I need a place to work. But we see people willing to quit and run away and deal with that a little bit more than I think was ever true in the past.
That's certainly especially true in the younger generations that we have right now. And I have a spectrum of people that are on my staff from just about 50 all the way down to 19, and I have everybody in between. And there's a radical difference in how they view their job and how they view life and how they view loyalty and what that looks like, and commitment to a job, and long term means different things to the different age groups. And one of the characteristics of this youngest age group, that the Gen Z, I think that's what their label is that they want to know why they should be there. How can they make a difference? And how can you invest in them? And so it's got that challenges, because they're not there just to be there. They're not there just for a paycheck. They are because they need that to make a living, but there's more to it for them.
And there's going to be a little bit more tension. You and I have talked about, like, people leave church is at the drop of a hat. Somebody looks at them sideways, they never go back. But at work, I mean, I get looked at sideways. I still need a paycheck. But let's kind of jump into a little bit as a leader. So this is somebody who's you do have decisions to make. You have protocols to follow, systems to make. You have to navigate structures. As a leader, we want to talk about a couple of challenges, and some that I think, Jamey, you'll be really good at talking about. And the first one is decision fatigue. So you started a church 15 years ago?
Yeah,
15 years ago. And it's grown. You've gone from multiple locations, like you were here and then there and then over there, and then you had a building, you didn't have a building. And obviously everybody's looking to you. How do you handle decision fatigue? How do you not get burned out in that?
Listen, that's a real thing. And unless you've been in a position like this where you're overseeing a lot of people and responsible for a lot of things, you don't understand how tiring decision-making can be. But the truth is, when you're the point man, you got to make the decision, or at least help navigate through the decision-making process. And one of the ways that I've learned to do this is figure out what your personal rhythm happens to be. So how do you operate during the course of the week? When are your prime days? When are your prime work days where you are geared up and you have the mental capability to be able to make the decisions that need to be made? And Kerry Newhall calls that your green zone.
Yep.
And he's referring to your time of the day. But I think it's not only the time of the day that you're at your peak point. I think it's also the time of the week where you're at your peak point. For example, I work all day Sunday because you got services, I got preaching, I got people, I got usually sometimes appointments at night and activities that are going on. I'm exhausted by the end of the day, and it's usually a good exhaustion, but I'm just tired. And I intentionally go in a little bit later to work on Monday morning. I call it my Sunday hangover, because I need that extra rest to get geared up for the rest of the work week. And I do not do any major decision making on Monday. I have our staff meeting where we debrief from Sunday. We talk about the upcoming weeks. We do a little staff training. My rest of my day for Monday is open to working with staff and helping them walk through issues. But I don't have any heavy meetings. I don't have any heavy decision-making because I'm not on top of my game.
Yeah.
I'm still emotionally drained. I'm still tired, and I don't function well or make decisions well when I'm at that point. And so if you're going to navigate through this decision fatigue thing, don't make decisions when you know you're not at your top level, because it's going to come back and bite you.
And I remember, again, being in, this is something that I've thought it would be like, you would always say, hey, just make the decision. You were great at pushing the decision making down as well. Mm-hmm. And which is difficult, because in order to do that, you have to hand over control. So that I thought, I remember just the simple times like, Jamey, we're out of chairs. Okay, then what do we do about it?
Solve the problem.
Solve the problem. And I think oftentimes we get decision fatigue because we feel like we have to answer all the decisions or make all the decisions. And it really comes down to how well are we equipping our people to make decisions.
And that's you're spot on. And I'm not a micromanager. I know some guys are. I'm responsible for everything, but I do not micromanage everything. If I have to stand over your shoulder and tell you how to do it, I don't need you. I can just do it myself. So right. I give my staff a lot of freedom to be able to do the job for which they were hired. My role in this is to help them figure out how to do that the best way possible. Yeah. And then turn them loose to be able to navigate through that themselves. And they are responsible for it. And they have freedom to come talk to me about some things before they pull the trigger on something, and I'll help them. But what I do is facilitate their way through it. Yeah. And if you can teach them how to make decisions, that takes all that off of your plate. And the art of facilitation for me is asking questions, never giving answers. Yeah. But it's asking questions, and it's taking someone from point A to point B, because it's where they need to go, but they don't know that yet. Yeah. Yeah. And as you facilitate them through it, they realize it becomes their own idea, and suddenly they think they figured the whole thing out.
Right. Right.
And really they have, but you've just shown them how to find the answers.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, if I can show them how to find the answers, then they don't need to come to me with that again.
Exactly. And again, it's about building a framework for them to process and work these things through. And understanding your rhythms, understanding your people, because everybody's got different comfortableness with those. I see this. It's interesting at the dealership as you kind of see that microcosm, where if I didn't have to talk to anybody throughout making the car purchase, that I would be just fine. I would have no problem. I would feel 100% comfortable. But if other guys didn't just say, "Hey, I'm gonna go talk to the customer about this," they just kind of need that permission. And because people are at different levels with those things and just have come in, but understanding where you're at, understanding your team, giving them freedom to do that. And I kind of want to, and this jumps into that next point, how do you navigate the failure then? So you've empowered your team, and then they did something dumb. Not that that's ever happened to you, but
ideally, you take care of that on the front end by teaching them how to make the decision so that you don't have to be there every step of the way. ideally you've given them the freedom and permission to come and talk to you kind of at that 11th hour before they're ready to make that final checkpoint. They've done all the homework up to that point, and they're just double checking, have I done all this stuff right?
Yeah.
And my team does that really well. Well, they'll walk in and say, hey, you got a minute? And they'll walk me all the way through it. And they'll say, here's what I've arrived at. Does that sound right to you? And I'm like, yeah, go do it. Run with it. And it's depending upon how new they are or how young they are determines what level of answers I give to that or how right they are oftentimes. But it's not very often where we have them make a bunch of mistakes, or at least not the same mistake twice. My assistant here a few months ago ordered some stuff for Christmas for us, and she ordered a complete wrong thing. And it came in, I saw that, and I'm like, why do we order 5,000 of these? Well, because you said this. I'm like, that's probably how that sounded, but here's what I was talking about. And she went, oh, her eyes got real big. And I'm like, well, that was a $500 mistake. Don't make that one again.
Yeah.
I mean, you just learn what not to do.
Yeah. Well, and I love that idea. I'm trying to remember. I think it was IBM where the guy made a huge multi-million-dollar mistake. And then the CEO called him into his office. He was expected to get fired. And he's like, well, we just spent $1 million training you. Why would
That's right. That's exactly it.
And but that's a difficult feeling as the boss, especially when you have bosses and people you report to and things that you hold accountable are being held accountable to be that guy is tough.
It depends on the relationship you have with your team. And if you have that safe relationship where they know that if they mess up, it's not the end all for them, that gives them a lot more freedom to be able to go and do their job and not live in fear or look over their shoulder. And if they know that if they make a mistake, or actually probably when they make a mistake, unless it's something, a level 10, it's not going to be a deal breaker for us.
Yeah.
It's going to be a time to learn a lesson for us. And most of my team has done a really good job of mitigating a lot of that. Yeah. And then when they make a mistake, they own it, which that's if they can own it, then that's half the battle right there. I don't have to convince them of what they did that was a mistake. They're like, man, I messed up on them. Okay, good. Now we both know that. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, and moving on, Hearts, hold it like it's you have to, like you said, you have to be secure in yourself in that. They have to be secure. And it's crazy when you do. I mean, you and I have talked about this enough, and we've done enough deep dives into it to understand how good functioning teams work, that you have to have a foundation of trust, and you have to be able to build off that and have good conflict and good accountability. In fact, that, lets people move past the amygdala into the frontal cortex where the problem solving and everything happens inside, because if they're in fear flight mode, they can't process and think correctly. It's great. There's all this science and all this thing about it, but at the end of the day, the truth is, be for your team, have your team be for you, and success comes.
But a lot of that is what does a culture of your office look like, or your team look like? Because that determines how everybody around you functions and acts, and their work ethic and their buy-in and their commitment to everything. And that you talk about navigating failure. One of our core values that we operate with as staff is that everything is an experiment. And so I'm teaching a lot of my new guys right now because they say, well, what if this doesn't work? I'm like, well, everything's an experiment.
Yeah.
I'd rather try it and fail than not try at all. And when they hear you say that enough and again and again and again, that gives them a lot of freedom to go attack something that's never been done before. So they don't have this fear of failure kind of hanging over their head. and it might not work, but let's go back and retry it, or just scratch and say, hey, that was a dumb idea. Let's go try something different. And nobody likes to fail, but I know Maxwell says fail forward. So if we're going to fail, let's move forward with it and build upon that and use that as a stepping stone. And we can continue to build what we're building.
So this wasn't in our notes, but I had a conversation with a guy about what you're talking about. And so if I can let you expound upon it a little bit as a, and maybe for the sake of this, is you could think back to when you weren't the top guy, when you were that middle level, youth pastor, mid-manager kind of guy, or if you could think about your staff and how they develop their teams and their cultures. How do you, as a leader, develop that culture and make sure it's the one you want?
No, that's a great question, because when you're the top leader, the culture you have is your own fault, because you set the tone for all of it, and that's for every single detail, because your team's going to mirror what it is that you do and how you act. You say whatever you want to say, but they're going to do what you do.
Right. And owning that, just owning that, and acknowledging, like, okay, I am responsible for everything. And I think most leaders are mentally okay with saying, hey, I'm responsible for, if these people didn't respond the way, like, I'm responsible for that. But then when it comes to take mental ownership, the kind that actually makes you do something different about it, it's a whole different story. It's one thing to have the buck stops here on your desk. It's another thing to truly believe it and do the work that's required to make that true.
Do you remember one of the things I would say to you guys when you were working on stuff is, I will let you fail, but I will not let the project
event fail, the project fail. Yep.
I do the same thing today.
Yeah.
Not as much because I'm dealing more with adults than with teens, but it's still the same mentality where, you might fail, but I will not let this fail, because it's too important to let that thing, the ministry fail.
Yeah.
This little part of it you're working on, that might stumble. That might be a dumb idea that I let you run with, but I'm not going to let the ministry fail. But when it comes to, the team culture and how they operate in the office, from person to person, from staff to staff, this is contagious, negative or positive. And so if I have a team of people around me that knows that they can fail and they're not going to get fired, that gives them a lot of freedom to do their job. And honestly, it makes it a lot more fun. So if they know that everything's an experiment, then okay, that didn't work. We try to invest a lot if it's just going to be an experiment, so we're not wasting a lot of resources on that project or whatever, but that's part of the culture that you create too. And that's one of the things that I'm big on right now is, do we have the team atmosphere? Do we have the staff culture that I would want to work in if I were them? And try to look at it from that perspective at the same time. Do I know what my job is? Do I have the resources to do my job? Do I have the freedom and the authority to make decisions within my job? Do I have the ability to not do everything right and fail and learn on the job? Because again, I'm working, my kids worker is 19. My youth director is 25. And my music director is 35. So I have another, my discipleship pastor, he's 47. So I got everybody in between.
You got the full
me
gamut. Yeah.
Yes. And so you got different perspectives and different stages of life, but they still all have to know, how do I fit into this? And am I valued? Am I loved? Am I needed? Am I respected? Do I have the stuff to do my job? And are you going to micromanage me or turn me loose? And are you still going to be there to help me out when I need help?
Right. How much? So thinking about that and building that culture, and if you're watching this, you're the viewer, I also want you to be mindful, like, Jamey's good at his job and he's been doing this for 15 years. So inside of that, he's good at it. He's been doing it for 15 years. How hard is that for you to continue to lead that? If you could put an effort gauge, you know.
Yeah. I'm going to say yes and no. You're looking for a number, but I'm going to say yes, it's easy, and no, it's not easy. Because it goes with momentum. Okay. And, momentum, it always makes you look worse than you are when it's negative, and always makes you look better than you are when it's positive.
Right.
So you got to find that.
I'm a Lions fan. I get it.
That reality of where you are, of what is the momentum I have, because that's going to help with the ease of how our culture and how our whole ministry is doing, and how the whole team is actually functioning and working together.
That's good. Yeah, because I think you can't set it and forget it.
No, you can't.
That way.
And it can't just be something you have on the wall that you never talk about, but you point to when trouble happens.
Right. That's never happened to me.
Well, our staff meeting last week, I reminded our team, I said, just a reminder that we can all vent in this room, but at the end of the day, our job is to work with people. Mm. So, people suck sometimes, but that's our job, is to work with them at their best and at their worst. And sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's hard, but they're still our responsibility.
Yeah. In a good culture makes a big difference. Shout out to Brandon for jumping in on that in the chat there. So Jamey, I know we could probably keep talking about it, but I want to keep moving. How have you handled a moment when you doubted yourself?
I cried.
And this is for people who maybe, kind of know Jamey, but don't really know him. They're going to be like, well, he's never doubted himself. So let people in a little bit. When have you doubted yourself, and how'd you handle it?
I assume you're talking about this imposter syndrome concept.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This is a big term for me. If you talk about the imposter syndrome, first of all, it likens me back to the Big Bang Theory, where they won the Nobel Prize, and anyway. As a leader, for a long time, and you've heard me say this for a long time, Karl, I make it up and sound confident. Mm-hmm. And there's a level of truth to that, but that's not a good way to live. The world would say, fake it till you make it. That's not a good way to live either. If you're talking about this imposter syndrome, leaders have this misconception that we have to be miles and miles and miles ahead of the people that we're leading. And that just isn't the case. That isn't true. If you're leading, you only have to be one step ahead of the person that you're leading. That's it. Because that person cannot see any farther than that one step, hence their need for a leader. And so as we battle this whole reality that we know that we're leading somewhere that we've never been, and we know that we don't have all the answers, and we know that we don't have this all figured out where we're going long term. If I have the answer for the next step and the next step, that's good enough for right now. Yeah. Because there are times where you have incredible clarity and you can see miles down the road. And then there are times it is so foggy you can't see your step in front of you, but you're still leading. And we just know that, okay, I'm leading, my people are following, and right now they're right behind me. My job is to stay one step ahead. Yeah. Because we can't lead where we have not been.
I heard somebody say vulnerability has never caused somebody has never caused somebody to look down upon you. As we're friends, as I've been vulnerable to you, you've never gone like, well, that's because you're lame. It's because you suck. It's been an opportunity for you to be like, yeah, man, me too, or I feel you, and well, let's work through this together. And it's vulnerability. We think of it often as an evil word. We can't let people know that we're in the midst of a struggle or having a hard time or anything like that. We must always be the paragon of greatness. And but the truth is, appropriate vulnerability, right? It is awesome. It helps people lean in and be like, Greg Rochelle says it best. People would rather follow someone who is always real than someone who is always right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a difficult, it's a difficult thing. Let's jump into kind of some practical strategies for overcoming some leadership challenges. This is when the rubber meets the road, because I work at a car dealership. So how do you reframe a challenge as an opportunity with your team, in your heart, either or? How do you reframe?
It's all perspective. And along with perspective comes where you're at personally, because that determines how you see things. If you're having a bad day, you're going to see things that way. If you're having a great day, you're going to see things that way. And if you want to change a challenge to an opportunity, you have to realize that in my field, because I of being of the ministry kind of a setting, God placed those challenges there for a reason. So how do I navigate through that and use that to learn from and get stronger because of? It's either with a challenge, you either run towards it or you run away from it. And you can either ignore the opportunity or you can run towards that opportunity. And that's back to that decision fatigue. Where am I at mentally to be able to make those decisions? Good. And also part of that failure, like I tried this before and I failed, so we're scared to try it again, because that's a reality too, because that fear factor sets in where I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
But sometimes that same opportunity drops itself right in front of you again, and you failed before, but it's that mountain you have to climb. A lot of these are problematic. Can we just admit that?
Yeah.
When it comes to these issues, they're problems. So how do you change a problem to an opportunity? You have to deal with the problem. You have to deal with the issue. And I know that there are a lot of leaders that they just ignore problems. And they ignore problem people, they ignore problem issues. And listen, to ignore the problem does not make the problem go away. And to sweep the problem under the rug, that only makes for a lumpy rug that people trip over. The problem is still there.
Yeah.
So when it comes to these kind of things, my personal nature is to go after it, is to attack it, because it's the whole idea of just eating the frog. Yeah. And it's that I think it's Brian Tracy that wrote that book. So if you eat the frog first, then you deal with it and you move on. Get that hard thing out of the way first. Otherwise, it's going to haunt you until you deal with it. And it's still going to be there.
It's still going to be there. And I think so often, and again, because we're avoiding, because we don't like conflict, because it is difficult, a lot of opportunities or a lot of challenges, when I tell you something difficult and we've hashed it out, our relationship is usually stronger.
Mm-hmm.
We're at a better spot. Things are ran better. Culture's better. The team knows I have a leader that handles things, which means the team is going to respond better. When we start looking at our challenges and understanding, it's a lot like working out. If I go and I do if I go to Planet Fitness, even though I got out of work an hour late, and it's -2 outside, I do the hard. I go in, I put my shoes on, I do the lifty, and I jog on the treadmill, and I'm assuming that's what people do at Planet Fitness. I don't know, but no, if you go and you do the hard thing, the next time it's easier. The next time it's easier. The next time it's easier. As we look at challenges and we start saying, I care about the things that I want to be successful more than I care about feeling uncomfortable at the moment.
It's true.
And especially when you're dealing with people, like, man, I've seen so many people mess up and get close to being fired because nobody pulled them aside and said, you got to knock it off early enough. They've developed bad habits, and and that's the worst. You know, I like somebody so much, I'm going to fire them.
Listen, we don't like conflict. The average person doesn't like conflict.
Right. We like conflict.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's the reality of a lot of problems, is that you see something as a leader, but if you don't address it, it's most likely it's going to get worse. Because if you see something in one of your employees, or you see something in your organization that is not right and that you don't like, to ignore it, that is actually validating that bad habit or that bad thing that's going on, because you're choosing to be silent on that issue. And so everybody assumes, well, the leader hasn't said anything, the boss hasn't said anything, therefore it must be okay.
Yeah.
And
that's so good. And if you're a leader, again, like, that's something, if you take that away, as well as the culture thing, I think you got your price of admission. But
which is free, right?
Which was free, by the way. I'm not sending you money, but no, but that's so, like, you're validating that. You're validating the bad behavior, and you're saying this is okay. And well, I didn't actually say it was okay. Well, I didn't tell him, we sent out a memo that it wasn't okay. Well, you didn't follow up on it. You didn't have the conversation, and that meant it's okay.
Look at it from a coaching perspective. I coach high school sports, and baseball starts next Monday. And we're going to start back at the basics with the fundamentals, and it's with varsity. And if I let something little go as a fundamental, they're going to build upon that negative bad habit.
Yeah.
And you can go no further than your fundamentals allow you to go. So coaching, I'm constantly correcting. I'm constantly showing the right way to do things. I'm constantly helping them see the bigger picture, because otherwise they cannot improve. They might have natural talent, but they don't have the ability to know how to leverage all that natural talent yet. Hence their need for a coach. And the same thing is true when you're in the workplace or in a leadership setting, that you have to look at your team and say, I have to address this. I have to fix this. I have to redirect this, and then help them see the why behind it, so they know you're not just hammering on them.
Right.
And you coach them all the way through this.
I always say, people, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. And again, that's our job as leaders, as coaches, managers, mentors, to go in there and help tweak that, because if they're going to keep repeating it, it's going to become a habit, it's going to become muscle memory, and that's the way they're going to respond and act and work.
Exactly.
And it is so hard to do that repeatedly and consistently, especially when I pay them to do this. And
they should just know better.
Right. He's an adult. That's it. So that's great. Reframing that. Staying resilient. How can you work to stay resilient?
I think that likens all the way back to your decision fatigue where you started. You have to have a way that you get refreshed, that you get recharged, that it's, again, part of your natural rhythm for you personally. Otherwise, you just run out of gas.
Yeah.
And you end up operating at levels that you have nothing left to give. And again, I know me personally that when my tank is low, I'm not a good leader. I'm not a good anything at that point.
Right.
And let alone be able to make decisions or navigate through some things. So stay resilient. It's understanding that you need the natural things like rest and like something that's going to recharge you, but also understanding that sometimes the job gets hard. It just gets hard, and leadership is not for everybody. That's why most people just follow. It's easier to have someone tell you what to do than it is to lead other people through it. And a leader is not someone that just tells people what to do, but someone that knows the way, shows the way, and goes the way, and is able to take people with them on the way. But it gets tiring.
Yeah.
Especially when you have people that would rather whine and complain about you leading them, even though they can't even lead themselves yet.
Right.
They don't like what you're doing, but they don't like what they're doing either. You're like, oh, come on, man.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it again, this is nothing new under the sun. I'm just wrapping up numbers in my personal Bible reading plan. And, the whole time, why weren't we still in Egypt? Why aren't we still in Egypt? This is nothing news under the sun. If you're leading people, they will complain.
That's correct.
Yeah. So if you could share a little bit about how you, over the years, have maybe built up, you'll have to do a little bit quickly because we're running out of time here. How have you quickly built up to make sure you're going to be good for the long haul?
Don't do it alone.
Besides having me as a friend. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, honestly, that's part of it, is that you don't do this alone.
Yeah.
And it's not just a team that you work with every day, but the people that you surround yourself with, that inner circle of people that you trust, of people that you know that you can turn to, people you can unload on and not going to be freaked out by it.
Mm-hmm.
People that are ahead of you and can pour back into you. I had a coaching call this afternoon from one of my coaches, and it was an hour straight. I had pages of notes. I'm like, wow, so this is really good stuff. And there's someone that is just that step or two ahead of you that can lead you as you lead other people. Yeah. And so a lot of this idea of staying focused and getting past the fatigue and overcoming the failure and getting past that imposter syndrome and being able to know where it is that you're going and stay with it, is having someone that's ahead of you leads you step by step all the way through this. So for me, that's what I've done.
Yeah.
Is have that small inner circle of people that you trust, people that are coaching you, people that are pouring into you, that will help you, direct you as you lead in your area.
Well, and that's been, so to break it down, you have those people ahead of you, and you're investing in that. It's not just you just found them.
That's correct.
Some of them you found, and you're doing that. Others you're investing in. You're also making sure I have a group of people around me that are going to support me, move me, and go there. And you're doing the hard work of understanding you can't let off the gas. You're in a marathon, and you got to keep going. Do you have two ways, and then we'll get to the last, we'll close it up here. 2 ways do you think leadership's going to be different here in the next couple of years than it is today? How's it going to change?
You talked about this, you bumped this earlier. You talked about vulnerability. So when I take a look at the future of leadership, and I think this is one of the reasons why we are doing so well right now, is that vulnerability / transparency / authenticity / relatability is so key to being an effective leader in today's society, but it's so countercultural to what it used to be. And so we're having that massive shift and that radical change, that paradigm shift of how leadership was decades ago to how leadership is now, to not just being that authoritative dictator type of leader, but being more of the transparent leader that can get up in front of their team or their people and say, yeah, I don't have this all figured out. I'm doing my best, but I'm not perfect, or this is not my best day. And,
Yeah.
just being able to not just pour out all your feelings, but just let someone see you and go, I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes leaders, they put themselves way up here, and the people are like, I have no idea. We're in different worlds, you and I.
Right.
So if we can help people realize that we're in the same world, we live in the same neighborhood, we have the same issues. We got marriage struggles and family struggles and kids struggles and health struggles and relational struggles like everybody else does. We just hide ours most of the time.
Yeah.
But I think the future is going to be much more of that vulnerability to help it make it more relatable to the people.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Vulnerability is going to be huge. I think as well as just being really focused. I think culture is going to play a big. We're seeing that being just how does this place feel when I come and work into it, and it's going to be something we can't just let happen to us anymore. It's going to be something that we're going to have to dictate as leaders, which is hard work.
And it goes back to culture all over again.
Yeah. I mean, it's all leadership's hard, but it's also fun and engaging. So, Jamey, if somebody wants to learn more from you or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
You can email me. It's at jamey@genesischurch.cc, and I can get back with you that way. I'd love to be able to connect. I don't have the answers on all this stuff. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm reading books all the time. By the way, I talked about culture. This book right here, just read it this week. Really good book. I just came out a month or a week or two ago.
Okay.
By Jenny Catron. This on culture, good stuff. So I'd love to be able to help whenever I can, or answer questions, or give you the minimal knowledge that I have.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Have a good baseball season, and we'll be in touch, man.
So thanks, Karl.
All right. We'll